listening to Harrowsmith Radio. I'm your host, Wayne MacPhail. In this episode, Emm Gryner, who rocketed from a chicken farm to singing backup for David Bowie, talks about how singers and the rest of us can uncover the voices we've got inside. Next up, Ilona Daniel, Harrowsmith's relatively new food editor, explains how Anne of Green Gables and a father named Gilbert changed her life. So, changes of all sorts in this episode. By the way, if you want to read Harrowsmith magazine instead of listen to it, you can subscribe to the print version online at harrowsmithmag.com. And you can find Harrowsmith magazine on selected newsstands across Canada. But for now, settle in for the next half hour of Harrowsmith Radio. Emm Gryner's new book, The Healing Power of Singing, is, yes, a practical guide to becoming a strong singer and making it in the music business, but it's more than that. The book is full of poignant stories of the triumphs and heartbreaks in Gryner's own life and the idea of uncovering your voice, putting yourself in the path of opportunity, and finding strong mentors is advice we could all use whether we sound like Sinatra or not. Not, in my case. Here's my conversation with Emm all about voice. Hey, Emm, thanks very much for joining us. Your book is all about people finding their voice, and I want to talk about a couple of different ways of thinking about that. But to start with, when I was reading your book, you mentioned Tori Amos. And so I was imagining that it's 1991, you're 16 years old, you're living on a chicken farm with your parents in Lambton County, and you hear little earthquakes. Mm-hmm. And in Little Earthquakes, there's a line about her finding her voice, and it's been there silent all these years.
Yeah. 'Cause sometimes I said, sometimes I hear my voice, and it's been here, silent all these years.
So, and in the video, she's a young woman who's emerging out of a box when she sings that. So I want you to go back then and tell me how much you identified with that back then in terms of your voice.
Wow, that's an amazing way to start this podcast. Well, I've never really thought of it that way, but I think that element of being sheltered growing up near Lake Huron, my parents ran a chicken newspaper, so that actually was our only, I'm not saying that's the only time we left the house when they went to go cover poultry shows, but it was a little bit of we're a very close family. You know, we'd do everything together, whether it was go shopping or like go to these poultry shows. And music became that lifeline, sort of this window, right? And maybe that is the coming out of the box that you're talking about. And with someone like Tori Amos, I grew up listening to a lot of 80s music, and it was great and melodic and brave and crazy. But then there was this woman who was writing lyrics that just broke down all kinds of walls for me. And I think that album hit me at a time where I realized it was possible to express myself through lyrics and also take some vocal lessons. It all happened around the same time. So for you to bring that up is like, wow, maybe I should have put that in my book.
So I want to talk about the idea of voice because, and you're not explicit in the book, but to me, there's an implicit metaphorical aspect to your book, which is, yes, it's a really interesting book for somebody who wants to find their voice, to sing, to get into the music business, to develop their own label, whatever they choose to do out of that, especially for women, strong women. But there's also a sense of voice in a broader sense of that the book also speaks to people who need to find their voice for other aspects of their life.
Absolutely. And I say in the book that it's not about finding your voice, because that's a phrase that we hear endlessly. It's more about uncovering the voice that you have. And I was not a trained singer or a naturally gifted singer growing up, but I just really, really wanted to sing these songs that I was writing, you know, just plunking out on the upright piano at home and thinking, God, I could be on the charts. I came out of the gate pretty strong, whether it was blind faith or just like, yeah, I can do this, you know, maybe built up. That sense of confidence was built up from a lot of praise in my childhood and, you know, being top of the class and all that stuff. But as time went on, I realized that kind of approach, very achievement oriented, knowing I'm going to get a record deal. I knew I was going to get one and I got one. It doesn't really sustain. And underneath that was that voice that you're talking about, that sense of self. And I think for me, it didn't really become obvious until later in life when a lot of life challenges really hit me that voice had been suppressed. Similar to the way my actual voice didn't really get a chance to come out in childhood. I was too shy to sing, I think through my 30s and 40s, or early 40s, just a little too shy to admit that voice, that sense of self was missing or buried. So the book is about uncovering that for sure. And actual stories related to the way my singing voice helped me out of it, how life choices helped me find that sense of self.
It's an interesting sort of contrast that you talk about not having a strong voice, and you say in the book that you were a lousy singer when you were a kid. You found that voice later, but you also talk about having tremendous confidence based on early praise, maybe not early praise from your music teacher, Mrs. Fawcett, but maybe from your parents. So how did that balance out in terms of having the confidence but not uncovering your voice yet?
That's a good question. I think, having a bit of blind faith was like fuel, thinking, there's going to be no problem to amass awards and get on the charts and have a record deal and that sort of stuff. And the raw element of my voice, I always say this to the people that I coach, it's not like about some sort of destination that you're going to get to with your voice where like, boom, it's perfect. And okay, now I'm going to do things. When I had my Juno nominations and when I got hired to sing in Bowie's band, my voice was not at the top of its game, but I'd sort of put myself in the path of those opportunities. So I always say just create those opportunities and work a little bit on the things that you want to work on as you explore. A lot of people get caught up in feeling that lack of motivation and then they just freeze, right? And that's kind of the worst thing you can do. So if you just start, join a choir or like sing online with someone or whatever. Some of the most interesting, inspiring voices around us are so unique and they're not perfect. They're recognizable. And we've all been to like concerts where something has happened to someone on stage. They have to stop their song or something goes wrong and we become endeared to them because we see our own imperfections in these people that we love and idolize, right?
Yeah, I was watching the Billie Eilish documentary, and she certainly does that, right? Like she completely cripples her leg at one point in the documentary, and people just accept that. Right.
And I think that sense of knowing that it's okay to be imperfect and that you don't have to be perfect when you start something or even close to it can be really liberating.
So I want to talk about the idea of putting yourself in the path of opportunity. And I like that phrase, and I like the way that you think about it. And one of the ways that you suggest folks do that is by creating a vision board for themselves to imagine the reality they'd like to see for themselves. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that worked for you?
Around the time that I had my daughter, I was getting a little bit tired of touring by myself. My daughter was born in 2012, and it was a real shock to my system to have a daughter. I think for me, it reflected back that I hadn't really resolved a lot of my issues of being a woman in the world. Where do I stand on this and that? Like, how do I explain like makeup to her and things like that? And my response was, of course, musical. And I said to myself, like, gosh, it'd be great to like have a band with other women. And I started a band called Trent Severn. I actually started it with an amazing songwriter named Dana Manning. We were like banjo, fiddle, guitar, bass. At the very, very beginning of this band, when we were just like dreaming it up, we had a kind of a scrapbook idea, I guess. And one of the things in the scrapbook was to make a visualization. And this was my idea. And I cut out a picture of, I think I printed it out from the internet. It was a stage. No one was on it, but there were like thousands of people in the crowd. And I cut and paste our banner. I sort of created this banner that we didn't have yet with our logo on it. And then I put the three women us, I guess, on this stage. And then I took a picture of it because I don't really know how to Photoshop things. And I just took a picture of this collage. And that became a vision for me that I didn't always look to it, but it was there. I think the fact that I had made that vision, it just stayed with me. And then in 2017, someone had taken a picture of us on stage at Victoria Park in London, this festival called Home County Folk Fest. And it looked identical when I saw that picture and compared it with 2011. So there's 6 years between the two pictures. And it just formed this foundation for my coaching, where I always start off by asking people to make a vision board. And it's sometimes uncomfortable to ask people because you feel like you're sort of like their teacher and they're in like grade 4 or something. But 9 times out of 10, people are really excited to put this together because we have all these visions and dreams and desires that no one's giving us permission to talk about or put into action or cut and paste onto a board and talk about it, you know? And I honestly think it provides a real sort of destination in the GPS of life. I'm using quotation marks right now. And as much as it's not about the destination, knowing where you're going just is so liberating, and giving yourself the permission to dream really, really big. And that's what I think we stopped doing after like the teen years. So it's a really great exercise, and it really helps everyone that I work with.
So I want to talk about that coaching aspect, because it's really interesting that in your book, you say that when you first started coaching, it was sort of like, I was thinking of the Woody Allen line, those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach Jim. You were feeling, I think back then, that, oh man, I failed. Like now I'm just a voice coach. Like, But that turned around. Can you talk about how that turned around for you and the young woman that did that for you?
It's all perspective, right? So in the beginning, when you get to a certain stage in life where ideas are rigid, you know, and you think, well, there's no room for anything else. That's when I think things start to, I don't know, it's not fun anymore, right? So I had a bit of it was 2 years after my marriage broke up, and a girl in town, her mom came to me. This girl, her name is Emmy Fink. It's a great name. And her mom came to me and said, "Do you teach singing lessons?" And I was just had sort of the look on your face when someone presents you with like the worst kind of a food you'd want to eat, your least favorite food or something, or I don't know. It sounds pretty ungrateful. But anyway, I didn't want to do it. And then she came to me and I realized I had so much to share. And it just became about offering. And the focus fell away from like, oh, this is a failure. It actually felt like stepping into something really, really amazing and special. And that's when things started to sort of shift for me. So I started off doing those vocal lessons, and then it turned into mentoring because I realized, gosh, I've been in the music business or out of the music business, however you want to look at it, for 2 decades. I know some stuff. And then it really turned into what is now coaching. So it spans music and life and business. And I just really work with people to explore what they want to do. And it feels very natural. It feels very tied to my heart. And I'm so glad that I was open to it, because if I just kind of wrote it off as what I thought it was, I don't think I would be this happy. So that's how that all turned out.
You don't say the words, but it seems like you, when you say I started out as a vocal coach and then I moved to being a mentor, but the words that you use in the book almost move you to sort of a life coach position, right? You know, and I'm just quoting from the book. It says, "You deserve to be heard. When our voices are not clear, our lives are not strong." And that's a life coach statement. It's not just about the music business. It's not just about singing. It's about how you move through the world.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, life coach can be one of those terms that people misunderstand. I think when I realized what I did about my voice, which is that it mirrors the moves I make in my normal life, right? In my non-musical life, right? Like the stronger I felt as, you know, coming out of a bad divorce, coming out of losing friends to illness, and just also just like personal demons, that kind of stuff. The more I came out of that, the stronger my voice got. And I think it's a mind-body connection that a lot of us talk about these days, but we don't often think about it in terms of singing. I see this time and time again. I actually, when I was researching the book and interviewing people, I talked to a couple music therapists and professionals in music. I was trying to get their perspective on how singing and singing with others is beneficial to us. But what ended up happening is they would talk and talk and talk, and then they would share their own personal story at the end of our talk. And that's where they lit up. Some of them would talk about the times where they didn't honor using their own voice, or they weren't singing the way they wanted to. And then it just it was more confirmation that this is personal. Singing is personal. And the gifts that if you've always wanted to use your voice as a singer or speaker or whatever, stepping into that opens up all these other doors. Is really fascinating for me to just, my research sort of went a whole other way. So
I want to talk about another aspect of voice and personality and how you move through the world. So in the book, you say that as a personality type, you're an obliger. You like to be helpful to people. You like to coach people and encourage people. Mm-hmm. But then there's a sort of a dark bit in your life where you had a stalker. And the result of having that stalker in your life was to take some self-defense courses. And in the course of that, you learned the incredible power of saying no. And so, again, that's a physical thing that's when you strike a blow, you say that. Mm-hmm. But it also strikes me that for the obliger in you, being able to say no was important as well, right? That's
really interesting. I really love how you've interpreted these stories. It's really hard when you grow up kind of trying to please people all the time to take ownership, step into your power. And it just feels uncomfortable. I hear it from a lot of other women. It's when they want to share their truth, they just feel like vomiting or something because it's so uncomfortable. And I think that the uncomfortable moments are a sign that you're doing something right, especially if you're dissatisfied with kind of the patterns in your life, which, as a mom, as a good Canadian and good Catholic, it's just pleasing people is just a full-time job and hobby. And it feels wrong to go against it in any way. But that was a sign where I needed to do what felt right for me. Taking that self-defense course was, yes, very intimidating and uncomfortable to show up there at this studio with all of these women I didn't know, and what were we going to do, and is this even worth it? And I think it's another misconception, the self-defense course, that people think that's just like I say in the book, it's just you knee someone in the crotch and you run away or something. But it was a very, very emotional, powerful, spiritual experience to see that our instructors teaching us how to fight back or how to defend ourselves against an assailant. When you pair that strike with the voice, it just was so much more force. And then I, obviously I'm very glad I didn't ever have to use it. But when I faced that, I think I call him an overzealous fan now, but when I had to face him in concert after all of this, I just remembered being able to pair sound with movement. And I did that in my concert. So I channeled it into singing. And I remember just singing just looking right at him and feeling no fear. I think it's one of the most uncomfortable but empowering experiences of my life.
When I read that in the book, it was really funny because where I went to in my head with this forceful no, that incredible emotional power of no, was, and you touch on this song in the book, that the Peter Gabriel's Here Comes the Flood. There's that shift in that song where he jumps to Lord, Here Comes the Flood. That is exactly like that super powerful voice that just is like a scream coming, right?
Lord, here comes the flood. We'll say goodbye to flesh and blood.
Yeah, Yeah, and that song, that's really incredible that you touched on that, because I really only know the acoustic version of that, the sort of stripped down one. I always thought that was so powerful as well, just hearing voice and essentially piano, which was what I was doing quite a lot in my career. And that was never what I imagined. I imagined like being Madonna and prancing around. But I think that sort of less is more, focus on turning that emotion into sound, exactly what you're talking about, is available to each one of us.
So I just want to wrap up by reflecting on where you are now. And, with a simple question, are you happy now?
Is that like a Michelle Branch song or something? Are you happy now? I must be happy because I'm singing Michelle Branch in the Harrowsmith podcast. I have to say that I am. And it's not to say, I have rough moments, I have rough days. I think anyone who's like just says they're happy all the time, it's not really true. But I think it's about joy, right? So even in the times that are difficult, like parenting struggles, because I'm still a single parent at the moment, even though I have a partner, it's about forgiveness, right? So if you kind of feel like you're stepping into joy, into your power, those rough moments, you're less hard on yourself for them, and you know how to move out of them in a healthier way. So yeah, it's I guess it's everything in progress, right?
Right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story and for sharing your voice with us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the awesome questions.
That was Emm Gryner, and you'll hear her singing voice at the end of this episode. Stay tuned. Ilona Daniel has only been Harrowsmith Magazine's food editor for a few months, and I got to speak with her just when she took the gig on. We discuss her love of vibrant food, local producers, and Anne of Green Gables. Here's our conversation. I wanted to start off just talking a little bit about your background. You were out here in Hamilton. I'm recording this from Hamilton. You're in Charlottetown, and you were in Hamilton to become a lawyer, and now you're a chef in PEI. So talk about how that shift happened.
Actually, I'm a Hamilton girl, born and raised. I would say my passion, I've always been very passionate about politics and policy and procedure and empowerment. And my thought was I was going to be a lawyer. That was the plan. I had an apprenticeship. I was working at a law firm. And then I started doing the work and reading a lot of the the journals. And I said, I'm going to be sitting at a desk for quite a long time. And I don't know if that's for me. And my family, as I'm a first generation Canadian, and my parents, we grew up in a house where everyone sat around the table. We ate dinner as a family every day, but we've always been about food. And one thing that people underestimate, I think, a lot of times, especially out here on the East Coast, is really the power of Anne of Green Gables. Believe it or not, that is a big influencing factor in what brought me to Prince Edward Island. When I was a little girl, my father, his name is Gilbert, when he was growing up in Lebanon, his father was an English professor, and on Sundays he would get to hang out in his office, in his study, and he was kind of fascinated by Canada, and he saw this book and he read it, and the fact that his name was in the story, and he just loved the character of Anne. And so he got me to read the books, and it really struck a chord with me. When I got the opportunity to apply for the applied degree in culinary operations in Prince Edward Island at the Culinary Institute of Canada, I did that, and the rest is history. But I have to thank Anne. She's what brought me to Prince Edward Island.
That's really cool. And I hope you didn't hit your father over the head with a slate. Did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So you've been as we record this, you've just been appointed the food editor for Harrowsmith, which is fantastic. Great. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. Are you coming into this? And I'm thinking about like Ruth Reichel when she came into Gourmet magazine for Condé Nast. She did like a wholesale change to the way the publication dealt with food. Are you thinking that kind of wholesale change, or what's in your head right now as you think about it?
I certainly want to be a continuing part of the legacy of this iconic Canadian publication. But I would say for me, what I plan to bring and what I'm injecting into the publication is more of a sense of playful, vibrant eclecticism in the food stories. We want to look at bringing in our beautiful patchwork quilt of culture and cuisine and ingredients. But we want to make the recipes approachable, vibrant, beautiful, healthy, but fun. I think fun is really, really important. I want to be able to connect with our readers in a more intimate way. I'm hoping that through our social media engagement that we're able to do that. I want to see our readers trying out the recipes. It's not just about looking at them, because quite often people are looking at cookbooks and say, oh, that's really quite nice. But it's all about getting people in the kitchen, trying these recipes, and empowering our readers in the kitchen. I think that's really, really important, and that they're part of the collective narrative of what we're doing as a food store here at Harrowsmith.
That's great. That's a really great approach. I like that sort of engagement approach. You also, on top of vibrancy, you're also really interested in local ingredients and getting to know local producers. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, living on Prince Edward Island, there's a very direct connection to the people who produce, grow, and process our culinary bounty. And so for me, it's not just about a faraway notion about supporting local. I actually know the people and their families producing the local ingredients that make PEI Canada's food island. And certainly while my focus is very keenly on PEI, this doesn't mean that these principles don't apply to every other province in Canada. Our farmers, our fishers, our producers, these are the people that are the backbone of our food system. And if we want to preserve our agricultural legacy, it's imperative that we do our utmost to support them.
Well, thank you very much for letting us get to know you a little better, and good luck in the gig.
Thank you.
That was Ilona Daniel in Charlottetown, PEI, surely the best Atlantic province. So, here we are at the end of this episode of Harrowsmith Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to this podcast at Apple Podcasts or in your favorite podcast player. And please tell your friends and family. Got feedback? We'd love to hear it. You can email us at letters@harrowsmithmag.com. That URL, harrowsmithmag.com, is also where you can order subscriptions online. And you can find Harrowsmith Magazine on newsstands of selected stores across Canada. Until next time, for Harrowsmith Radio, I'm Wayne MacPhail. And also, until next time, remember these 4 words: make, grow, sustain, share. Tune in for the next episode of Harrowsmith Radio. And as promised, here's Emm Gryner with Black-Winged Bird.